In this tutorial, we're going to explore creating an interior with a minimal amount of polygons, something that might be a little bit more appropriate for a game design environment. So I have here two rooms that are pretty close to the same. You see the only one difference here is that this one has got a cube in it. Now, what you're looking at in the background is also a thing called a free image plane, and that's going to allow us to bring in a template that will serve as our reference for drawing this wall and creating the floor and the crate. Now, the first thing I want to do is compare the polygon count of these two faux rooms we're looking at here. So I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to go to Heads Up Display and to make sure that I've clicked on Poly Count. And when I do so, you'll see that in the upper left-hand corner, there are a few terms and then 3 columns of numbers. We're interested in the one that says Faces. Now, if I were to go and select a surface, the numbers that are generated here, first on the left, is the amount of polygons that appears in my entire model. The number to the right of that 431, which is 6, is that 6-sided polycube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather in, as I've grouped these already, I'll select one element and hit the up arrow. And now if I was to go over to faces again, the second number I see, the 120, that's the number of faces that makes up this model on the right. Now I'm going to click on the one on the left, and I'll hit the up arrow to gather the whole group. And now next to the 431 is 312. So this is twice as big as the one with the low poly count. And if we were to examine these, going through the side, you'll notice that the back of this is hollow compared to the one that I created on the left and what we've been using for our interiors. So by using the proper tools, we can go in and create something very similar, but with a much lower polygon count, which means it's going to load quicker in the game environment. So let's get started. Now, I've also applied a texture map to this to show you that even though this poly count is low, the texture really makes up the difference. You can see that our model looks pretty good with that simple geometry and then a nice texture map on it. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the free image plane that my reference art will be on. I'll hold down the space bar, go to Create, and about 2/3 of the way down you'll see free image plane. Just click on that word. You'll see that as a wireframe bright green box appears in your viewport. Now the next thing I need to do is bring in the template. I could do one of two things. I could hit Control A to go to the attributes, or I can click on the attribute tab. And when you do, you'll notice that there is an image name text box with the yellow folder, much the same as our textures. I'm going to click on the folder, and I'm going to go out and get my interior template. Now it's a .jpg, and that's preferable. Once I click open, it accommodates the shape and size of that reference drawing that we're going to use. I'll hit W on the keyboard, and I'm going to move this back off of my x-axis because I'm going to be creating my art in that front viewport, and I don't want the polygons being buried inside the reference drawing. Now there's one other thing I'm going to do before I lock it down on its own layer. On the right, in the attributes, you'll see the alpha gain. I'm going to drop that down to about 0.3. Now, this is subjective. You'll see that what it's doing now is making the template a little bit more translucent, which will make it easier to introduce our geometry in the front view. Now I'm going to go to my channels window, Control A, or I would click on channel box. And with the template selected still, I'm going to click on the last icon on the far right of the layer window. The polyplane, the white polyplane with the blue ball. And if you recall, by doing that, it assigns the selected geometry to that new layer. I'll name it template. And I'm going to click on save, and I'm going to lock it down. So in the layer window, you'll see the letters V and P, and then there's an empty blue box. When I click on that twice, I will see the letter R, and when I click off of it and try to reselect, it's now locked down. Now I'm going to go to my orthographic front view. And in my front view, I'm going to create a simple polygon plane. I'll hold down the space bar, create polygon primitives. And if you look at the bottom of the menu, you'll see that I've got interactive creation checked off. And that allows me to click on the plane tool and then to trace the shape I'm going to need to begin that wall. I'd like to be able to look through this to see the template while I'm working on it. So inside the viewport I'm working in, and these tools are redundant in all the viewports, I'm going to click on the ghost button. The ghost button is two interlocking white rectangles, little square rectangles. I'm going to click on it, and now my geometry's got translucence to it. Now we will add the tools that we're going to create that wall with. I'm holding down my Command and my Shift, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and I'm going to click on Extrude. I'll then go over to Mesh Tools, and I'm going to click on Insert Edge Loop, and then I'm going to click on Multi-Cut. Now with my polygon plane selected, I'm going to click on the Insert Edge Loop tool, which is a little white box and the orange line, and I'm going to click on that. I'll go over to my geometry, and then I click and drag. You'll see that that edge now bisects that polygon plane from top to bottom. I'll click and put another one over here, line it up with the molding. Now, if in the event it's not lined up properly, while it's brown, you can click on it with your Move tool, and you can line that up precisely where you'd like it to be. If for any reason you need to come back after you've gone to your object mode, you would simply right-click, choose edge, select the edge in question, hit W on the keyboard, and move it. Now the last line we need is the horizontal one to frame out the top of this door. So I'll click on the Poly Edge Loop tool again, and I'll click either here or here because I want it to go horizontal. And you can see now perpendicular to the line I clicked on is the new edge. So I've got the door basically roughed in. Now I'm going to start to do some house cleaning here. If we take a look at the amount of polygons here, there's 1, 2, 3 across here, and then 1, 2, 3 at the top. If I were to cut from this corner to that corner, I would be able to eliminate this line. And if I was to cut from this corner to that corner, I can eliminate this line and this line. So essentially, we're going to reduce our poly count. Right now, if we look at faces, we have 6 faces. I'm going to add another tool to my shelf. I'm holding down Command, Shift, Mesh Tools, and then Multi-Cut. And you'll see this little number 11 X-Acto knife blade. Now with this, I can click on lines, I can click at points where they converge on vertices. So I'm going to go up to this corner, right above the door frame. I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to come over to the corner of the room and click there and hit return. I'm going to hit W on the keyboard to get out of that tool. Now you'll find a lot of the tools, editing tools in Maya, that if you don't hit return, you remain inside the tool and you might be doing something you don't want. Now, I'm going to right-click, choose edge, and I'm going to select the edge that I want to get rid of, which is this one and this one. I'm keeping the diagonal. I'm going to hold down Command Shift, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, Command Shift held, and I'm going to put the Delete Edge or Vertex tool on my dock. Now when I click on that, it removes those edges. You cannot use the Delete key. All right, you have to use that tool. I'll select, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from this corner down to here before I get rid of this edge and that edge. So I'll click on my edge tool again, insert edge, multi-cut. I'll go from point to point, hit return to set it, W to go back to my move tool. Now I'll select the edges that I want to eliminate and click on the delete edge tool. So what we have now is 1, 2, 3 polygons where previously we had 6. So this is pretty much the mantra for environments for the game industry: low poly for efficiency. Let's continue cutting this up to get what we want. Next, we're going to put our lines in for our horizontal molding through the center of the room, and then the molding that runs along the bottom. Once again, I'll get the edge loop tool. The edge loop tool is the white box grid broken into 4 boxes and a vertical dashed orange line. I'll click on it, and I will click on one of the vertical lines that I know will give me what I want. Now, what's happened is because we've introduced the diagonals here, I'm going to need to go and move these vertices. So I'll hit W, I'll right-click, choose Vertex. I'll start here at this end of the room, and I'll move this down so it is with my art. At this point I want it a little lower, so I'll grab both of them now and I'll move them down. And I'll go over and do the same for this end of the room. Hitting F on the keyboard to be a little bit more precise. Back to my object mode. And once again, I'm going to grab the Insert Edge Loop tool, and now I'll click here. And because the top line has been straightened out, the second one will come in reference to the one that is now horizontal. Now let's go down and we'll do the bottom. I can click on that tool again, the Edge Loop tool, the box with the orange line, or I can hit G on the keyboard, and that repeats the previous tool for me so that it brings it back for me. So if I wanted to, I could do that. I'll click to put the next line in, and that takes care of the molding. I'll go back to my Move tool, back to my object mode, and let's see what we have so far. Now we're going to do the door, and it's a completely different approach than the Boolean difference tool we've been using till now. And in order to make this door lower in poly count, we're going to get rid of these horizontal edges that aren't necessary on the front of the door where the molding cut through. So I'll right-click, I'll choose Edge, and I'll shift-select the lines in question, which are these. And I'll click on the Delete Edge tool. It's the orange stacked boxes with the X in the corner. When I click on that, it eliminates them. I'm going to right-click now, and I'm going to choose Face. And I'm going to click on that face that we roughed in for our door. The next thing we're going to do is select our Extrude tool with that face of our door selected. And the Extrude tool is the little poly plane laying down, and then the orange box on top. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to use my Scale tool to pull the edges of this face in and match the inside brown box now to the shape of the door. Now, down below, I'm going to eliminate a polygon face here. So I'm going to select it, and I'll hit Delete, and then I'm going to select the edge, hit W, and pull that down to the edge of the model. Now I have these other lines that I don't want, so I'm going to select them and click on my Delete Edge, Shift Select these 4, and delete. So you'll see now that the molding on the wall stops at the molding that frames out our door. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to take the panel that's going to be the door. I'm going to select the face of it. and I'm going to hold down my space bar, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and I'm going to choose Extract. What it just did was it removed that poly face from the rest of the geometry. So if I was to go to my perspective window now, you can see that that's moving separately. You want to be careful when you use the extract tool because it goes to the editing mode. So once you select it again, you'll have to return to object mode and you'll want to center your pivot. Now I'm going to go into my viewport and I'm going to click on a little button that's going to allow me to see my cut lines on my polygon surface without selecting them. So no matter what part of the geometry selected, I'll still have references on the rest. Inside the viewport, whether it's your perspective or your orthographics, you'll see that there's a little blue box with a sphere inside, a white sphere. When I click on that, it shows me where I've cut already, even though the geometry is not selected. So if I select that panel now that we extracted, I can now move it and you'll see it's a separate piece of geometry. And this is going to allow us to maintain that low level of polygons that we want for our model to have. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use that extrude tool to work on our molding. So I'm going to select the wall, right-click, choose face. I'll select the 3 pieces of molding, and I'll click on the extrude tool. And then I'm going to click and drag on my blue axes to give it the shape I want. At this point, it's really up to you, the thickness you want. And I'm going around the back just to illustrate that the back of this is hollow. So this is going to allow us to make a very efficient model. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Edge, and I'm going to double-click on one of the edges on the inside, because what I'd like to do now is take my move tool and just pull that in a little bit, because usually molding tapers in towards the door. You have to kind of imagine this minimal geometry with the texture map that you would apply to it. Now we're going to work on our door. So I'll select my door surface, I'll go back to object mode, and I'm going to go to my front view so I can use my drawing as reference. In much the same way we sliced up the wall, I'm going to use the edge loop tool, and I'm going to start to put in the edges I'm going to need to frame out the details of this door. Now, if the game required really low poly count, then I probably would just rely on the texture to give me this effect. But in this case, I think it's a good idea to know how to kind of go in and add detail to areas that you might have to. I'm going in now and I'm just framing around where I know I'll be changing the contour of the geometry. And you click on the line that is perpendicular to where your intentions are as far as dropping this geometry. And right now I've got the basic shape that I need. Now I'm going to go in and clean up this poly count. So much the same as what we did with the room. Hit W, I'll go back to my object mode. Let's select our geometry. You can see that we had eliminated those extra faces. We're going to use the same approach for this as well. So I'll start up at the top. And I'm going to go up and I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. That's that little X-Acto knife with the orange lines. I'll click on that and I'll start in the corner here. And then I'll go to the corner of the door. Now I'm having a little problem because it's going right to the molding. So I'm going to go to my perspective view. And I'm going to go to my object mode for a second. I'm just going to pull that door out like so. Now I'll return to my front view and start working with the multi-cut tool. Hitting return as I drop it, I'll go to the other side, click in the corner, hit return. And before we go and start cutting any more off, let's start to eliminate so we're kind of clear on why we're doing this, and then we'll proceed and add more of these diagonals and delete the edges we don't want. So I'll hit W on the keyboard and I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose edge. So I know because of that diagonal I don't need this, I don't need this one, this one, this one, this one, or this one. Now I'll click on the Delete Edge tool. And we've just eliminated some of the faces. Now, I'm going to eliminate the ones on the inside here because this is not necessary, the ones that go through the entire door. So I'll select this one, Shift select that. And just to kind of illustrate what's happening, let's look at the face count. So we've got 63 in total, 21 on the door surface that we're working. So I'll click on the delete button and you'll see it's dropped by 2 lines. So, if you want to watch it update, you can do that as well. All right, so let's go down here now to the very bottom. And once again, I'll click on the multi-cut tool. I'll start here, start there, return, go to the other corner, click, hit return. W to return to my move tool, right click, choose edge. Let's start with this one. We'll go here, 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 there, and there as well. And we'll click on the multi-cut tool. Now, there might be a possibility of eliminating some of these as well. We'll deal with that as we start to introduce our geometry. The idea is that if you've got really flat surfaces, like a door, like a wall, a lot of these lines in the middle aren't necessary because once we map our textures in a planar view, those lines really are not significant. But let's start extruding in to get that bevel panel that we've got on this piece of the door. So I'll right click and choose face, and I'll select that face there, and then I'm going to shift select this one as well. Now, what we can do is we can click on our extrude tool, and if we leave it where it initially introduces itself, you'll see it's on the left panel. And what that means is that if I leave it here, I can click, and if I start to scale, it scales both of them equally the same way. So I'll click there, and then I'll get the red axis and I'll pull it in a bit. And this is going to be beveled, so I'm going to start to pull this back a bit, just like that. And you can see we already have what we need for that door panel. I'm going to right click, go to object. Now we're going to do the window on the door. I'll right click, choose face, select the face, and I'll click on the extrude tool. And I'll pull that back a little bit. And then I'll click to get the scale tool, and I'll start to bevel it in. Now, I know the bevel is not going to be equal on both sides, so I'll go to my front view and hit F and check out that as well. There we go. And that looks pretty good. Now I want this door to have a little bit of thickness to it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose edge this time. And I'm going to double click on the top edge. And you'll see that it's gone around and selected all of those edges. Now I'll click on my extrude poly tool and I can pull back the edges as well. So it works for faces and edges. That looks pretty good. I'll return to my object mode. Now next we're going to go ahead and we're going to extrude our molding. We're going to select the 2 faces in the middle of the room here. So I can go to my orthographics if I choose. Perhaps it's clearer in the tutorial this way. I'll select this face and I'm going to shift select this face. Go to my perspective view so I can check out the thickness of this. Click on the extrude tool and just pull it forward. Now I don't want it to be so blocky, so I'll grab my y-axis scale tool and I'll just pinch it in a bit. Now don't go beyond the thickness of the actual door frame, so I'm going to just put that a little bit further back. I'll right click and return to my object mode. Now we'll go and we'll do the molding down along the bottom of the floor. And the same process, right click, face, select those faces, top and bottom on both sides. Once again, click on the extrude tool, pull it out to get the thickness you want. Don't go beyond the frame of the door. You can see I just stopped shy of that. And now what I want to do is I want to select that second edge down. So I'm going to right click and choose edge, and I'll select this one and shift select this one. And I'm going to get my move tool, and I think I'll just pull that back a little bit like so. I think I'll do it to the top edge as well. And tuck that back a little bit. I'm going to do another thing on either end of this that might seem extreme, but you can see that there are poly faces here on the very end. And if there was going to be another wall up against it, we don't need those inside faces. So I'm going to take a moment to clean up the faces that I don't need. I'll right click, choose face, shift select these two. You can use the delete key for faces, but not for edges. You have to use the tool for edges. And delete. Now if we take a look at our poly count, we've only got 58 faces, and we've got this pretty much done. I'm going to put my door back where it should be here like so. And all we really need to do now is revolve our doorknob. And this is just the same way as we did for our previous interior. So I'm going to my side view, and I'm going to go to Create CV Curve Tool. And I'll keep it set for 2. And I'll just introduce something that will be my doorknob with this curve. If you recall, we needed to move our pivot, so I'm holding D, and I'll move that down to the bottom of that curve. With our path selected, we're going to Surfaces, and we'll go to Revolve, and we're going to go to the Attributes. And we're going to go down and choose Quads, and then Control Points. And I'll hit Apply. So what happens is you don't get perfect polygon faces, but you get a very minimal amount of polygons. And that's what we're looking for again with our game interior. So I'll kind of put this into position against the door. I'll go to my orthographic, place it here like so. I'll use my drawing for reference as far as scaling this goes. I'll hit F on the keyboard, then I'll hit R, and I'll just get the circumference. You'll see that it's quite blocky, and that's perfectly fine. If we zoom in on our doorknob, we'll see that there might be a hole in it. The vertices might be just broken up at the very tip of this, where they kind of converge. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a new tool for that called Merge to Center. So I'll hold down Command Shift, and I'll go to Edit Mesh, and there's the tool about 1/3 of the way down, Merge to Center. There's a circle, an orange circle that's cut up with some edges. I'll right click, choose Vertex, and I want to carefully select just in the center. Marquee them, and then click on Merge to Center. And I'm going to smooth this a little bit without actually adding poly faces. This is another feature that is used quite a bit in the game industry for game environments because that poly count has to be low, but we still want something to appear to be a bit round. I'll put the doorknob back against the door first. And I'm going to hold down my space bar, and I'm going to go to Mesh Display, and you'll see there's Harden or Soften Edges. I'm going to click on Soften Edges, and what it did was it just bowed them out a little bit. You'll see a bit of a shadow. It is not that significant, but just enough to give it a little bit more of a roundish shape. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything and delete by type history. So I'll go ahead and select all my geometry, and then click on my Delete by Type History button. Now, in the model we looked at previously with the texture map down, it had a tile floor, but once again, I'm not going to be using a whole polygon. It's going to be a polygon face. So let's go to the top view and introduce that. In the top view, I'll hold down my space bar. I'll go to Create, Polygon, Primitives, and I'll choose Plane, and I'll try to get that kind of like that. The scale is insignificant. All right. whatever your heart desires. And now let's go to our perspective view and make sure that that's down at the floor. So I'll go to my perspective view, and then I'll go to one of my orthographics just to be precise. And that looks pretty good, actually. There's the bottom of the floor panel. So we'll go out to our perspective. Let's give it a quick render to see what the deal is with this. So I'll click on my IPR, and you can see now we created that model. Now, the next thing we're going to do is create our crate. And for that, we're going to use a simple six-sided polygon cube. We'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cube, and just click anywhere in your viewport. The scale is up to you. I'm going to provide you with the map, so however you decide to scale that is really up to you, because what we'll be doing in the next tutorial is creating a thing called a View V texture map. And we'll be looking at a new tool called the editor. So if you haven't looked at the actual crate tutorial that will be posted prior to this one on the list, then you'll understand it when we finish this tutorial. It might be a good idea to actually go out and look at that. So what I'll do now is just bring everything up to the surface of my ZX viewport, and we'll return to do